Pat Cummins is out of the first Ashes test. What does that mean for Australia? Steve Smith in as captain, Scott Boland's the fourth seamer, and Australia are going to have to pick a fifth seamer. Who's that going to be? A lot of questions facing this Aussie Ashes squad. This is episode 4 of Ashes Questions. Now, the first issue for Australia is that Pat Cummins is quite good. In the last 8 years of home Australian test matches, he's got 177 wickets at an average of under 20. And in the Ashes of 21-22, the last home Ashes for Australia, guess who's top wicket taker? Pat Cummins. He had 21 wickets at an average of 19. In 2017-18 Ashes, down under, who was the top wicket taker? You guessed it, Pat Cummins. 23 wickets at an average of 25. And no one has got Joe Root out more times in Test cricket than Pat Cummins. He's got Joe Root 11 times in 31 innings at an average of 26. No Pat Cummins is going to free up both England and maybe even more. In particular, Joe Root, who's looking for his first 100 in Australia. Could that be the reason that gives Joe Root his first 100? Well, it's fair to say there's a pretty simple shoe-in for no Pat Cummins. Out goes Cummins and in goes Scott Boland. Let's have a look at Scott Boland's stats in Australia. Well, he's played 9 games there in Test cricket. 49 wickets at an average of 12. 12. On top of this, 3 matches in the 21-22 Ashes. Last time England were out there. He took 18 wickets in 3 games at an average of 9.5. Below 10, including that 6 for 7. Scott Boland's got 6 of the G, build the man a statue. That was the series when that happened. And there's no sign of his form deteriorating, to be fair, because he did take, in 2 overs, 3 wickets for 2 runs in the West Indies when they got all out for 27, I believe. However, there's a few questions facing Scott Boland, in particular, his battles against England. In England, admittedly on some flat tracks out there, especially up in the north. I think he played a lot of his games, but there was only 2 of them, and he only got out Zach Crawley. He got Paul Crawley out twice, and Boland was averaging 116 in that series. But more importantly, he went at an economy of 5 runs per over. England tracked him, knocked him off his line. And it's fair to say Boland was a little bit troubled when England went at Scott Boland. But fair to say they were also on flat wickets. So the main question is, do England have Scott Boland's number? Or is Boland still just the Wizard of Oz? Pretty simple swap for the Australian captaincy. Steve Smith will take the armband ahead of Pat Cummins. Now let's have a look at Cummins' win percentage as captain. Because of all the Australian captains to have more than 10 games as captain for Australia, he's 4th in the list of win percentages, just behind Steve Waugh, Ricky Ponting and Don Bradman. That's a pretty good list to be just behind there for Pat Cummins. His win percentage is 62%, but Steve Smith is a pretty good replacement. His win percentage for Australia is 57%. But the main thing between these two is Steve Smith seems to be the tactician, whereas Pat Cummins has been said to be a brilliant leader of the people. So there's often debates out on the pitch for Australia when Steve Smith wants to be aggressive, but Pat Cummins wants to be a little bit more defensive. So this is what's going to be most interesting, especially against Bazball, whereas Pat Cummins would look to defend and frustrate, put sweepers out early on against Bazball to just tie them down, stop them scoring. But Steve Smith will be seeing these as wicket-taking opportunities. Keep catchers in, keep fielders in, and hopefully take more wickets. But Steve Smith's captaincy could leak more runs to England. Now the 5th seamer debate, with questions over how many tests Cummins will play in the series, a 34-year-old injury-ridden Josh Hazlewood, and Stark at Boland at 35 and 36 respectively. This 5th seamer's not just going to have to run on the drinks, but he might have to play 1 or 2 test matches this series. Here are the options. Option number 1 is Brendan Doggett. Now, he was picked to play in the test squad for the West Indies. He didn't actually end up playing because he went home with an injury and he was replaced by the second option on this list. But he was also the travelling reserve for the World Test Championship final. He's missed the first 2 Shield games with that injury. It's just a hamstring one, so it is slightly minor, so he may be available. He was also Hazelwood's replacement for the Border Gavaskar Trophy last Australian summer. So this man, despite being injury-ridden, just like Josh Hazelwood, there is a chance he could be available. And the Australian selectors like him. Second spot is Sean Abbott. Now, this is the guy who replaced Brendan Doggett in the West Indies series. He has got 56 white ball games to his name for Australia. Heaps of white ball experience, but no tests for Sean Abbott. He was also on the Sri Lankan tour early this year. In his last T20 for Australia against New Zealand, he bowled 3 for 25 in his 4 overs. And in the 50-over competition at the Wacker, Sean Abbott got the wicket of Mitch Marsh on his way to taking 3 for 28 off 10 overs. A good pick, I think, would be Sean Abbott. Number 3, Michael Neser. Neser's a man who made his debut against England in the Ashes in 21-22. He did get a huge hamstring injury against India A last November, but he finished the Sheffield Shield relatively well last year, and he started it well this year. He's tied for 4th in the wickets-taking list alongside Scott Boland at 11 wickets. He's taken them at an average of 21, with a 4-fer against South Australia and a 4-fer against Tasmania. Michael Neser looks a seriously good pick. Now, 4 and 5 options are both a little bit far-fetched. However, with all the injuries rising up, who's to say? Who's to say these guys couldn't come in and play? At number 4, it's Jai Richardson. He hasn't yet returned to pro cricket, so this is a huge reach since his shoulder injury happened. But who's to say he couldn't come in? Australia love him. He's a great young bowler. He played for Australia against England in the pink ball test last down under series, I believe. At number 5, it's Xavier Bartlett. Again, a little bit far-fetched, but he's performing well in white ball cricket. He took a 3-fer against India in the second ODI, 10 overs, 3 for 39 against India earlier this week. But his rise in white ball form has meant that his red ball stuff is slightly deteriorated. He hasn't been playing a lot of red ball cricket recently, but arguably my favourite pick at number 6 for Australia. This is if I was an Australian fan, by the way. It's Fergus O'Neill. I like him because of his stint in England for Nottinghamshire in the County Championship this year. Nottinghamshire went on to win the County Championship, and Fergus O'Neill played just 4 games, but he took 21 wickets, including 2 fifers in those 4 games, at an average of 18. This year, he's got 6 wickets at an average of 30 in the first 2 Sheffield Shield games, and a 5-fer in his last game against New South Wales. He's bowling alongside Scott Boland for Victoria, an almighty partnership. So, I think Australia are going to pick as their 5th seamer Michael Neser, but I would not mind it at all if we saw Fergus O'Neill. A common theme is appearing in these Aussie selection issues. The team is falling apart. They've got no idea who they're going to pick, not only in the team, but also in the entire squad. It's been a long time since Australia have had this many selection worries ahead of an Ashes Down Under. And with Pat Cummins falling injured, you've got to think it's advantage England. Make sure to comment your next Ashes questions and subscribe.